New drugs that might save or improve our lives are continually being discovered. But will they be safe or have any dangerous side effects? They're trialled on humans, so we can find out.
The trial we're currently conducting here at Richmond Pharmacology is for a drug in osteoporosis. Osteoporosis is a disease which makes the bone brittle and thin, and it can cause fractures. In actual fact, it's already being given to patients at the moment in Europe, in many countries. And the reason we're doing another trial on this drug is that we want to check if it's got any effects on the heart. The study actually goes on over about 140 days, and the volunteers come 9 times to our clinic. Now, the reason for this is that they receive various treatments on the study, and so that we can see the effects of a placebo and of the actual study drug. A placebo is a dummy drug, and ideally it looks and it tastes the same as the real drug, so that no one knows, is it the real or is it the dummy drug. On this particular study, we are giving placebo as one of the treatments, because it's very important for us to distinguish what are actual drug effects and what are not drug effects.
These people have volunteered to take part in a drugs trial. They're just one group of many. When they arrive, there's a strict admissions procedure.
On each admission, the volunteers will undergo an admission procedure, which is very similar to a hospital admission. We have to check that they're still healthy. We have to check that they're not pregnant. We have to check that they haven't taken any medication. That also includes drugs of abuse. We do an alcohol breath test. Because there's quite strict criteria the volunteers have to stick to, because all of them could potentially affect the clinical trial.
The volunteers stay overnight as trial day starts early. At 06:30, the trial begins. Before being given the drug, the volunteers have baseline checks, an ECG, which checks their heart rhythm, and blood tests.
It's a long day. We get up quite early and it's very strict, the timing. We eat to the minute, have our doses and our blood taken and our blood pressure taken at specific times. So it's quite tough.
At 08:30, the first volunteer is given the medication. And at precisely timed intervals, the remaining volunteers are given their dose.
Five, 4, 3.
This has to be done very carefully, so that is usually done by a doctor and a pharmacist. We always check that the volunteer has correctly taken the medication, so we would check the mouth. Neither the doctors nor the volunteers know which treatment they are receiving. And it is packed in such a way that we cannot work it out. This is the best way of doing such a clinical trial, and it's called double-blind.
From 0900, the volunteers start having their heart monitored using an ECG. For the next 4 hours, they will all have an ECG every half an hour. It's timed to the minute.
This particular study, it would take nearly 30,000 ECGs. Of course, over a few months, but it's a large number of things that need to be done. And the volunteers during that time have certain restrictions. For example, the food is standardized, the amount of water and the time when they can drink water is standardized.
All these constraints are extremely important. They help to make sure this is a fair test.
There's very many factors you should consider when you want to ensure that a drug trial is a fair test. You have to make sure that there is a benefit to doing the study in the first place. The second very important thing is that the study needs to be safe, and that we as investigators need to make sure a study is safe to the volunteers. The third factor, I think, in conducting a fair trial is to make sure you do the study properly. So sure you know exactly what you do, and you should make sure you follow the protocol in all steps.
All drug trials have to follow a pre-agreed schedule. This is known as the protocol. After lunch, the trial slows down, but the volunteers are still monitored.
In the afternoon, you have more free time to yourself, to go to the internet room or TV room, just relax, read a book, read a paper, just really have more time to yourself.
The last factor to do a fair trial is to make sure you record the data completely and accurately. You don't withhold any information. You report the data as you have found it, no matter whether the result is to your liking or to the sponsor's liking or not.
All the data from the drug trial goes to a specialised area called data management. It takes months for the drug trial to be completed and the data analysed, and every drug undertakes many trials before it can ever be prescribed.
Six men are in intensive care tonight after taking part in a clinical trial of a new drug.
Six men are fighting for life, struck
If a
down
drug
by the
trial
drugs
goes
they were
wrong, the consequences can be life-threatening. But just how big is that risk? Can those risks make drug trials unethical?
What has happened at Northwood Park Hospital is something incredibly rare to happen. The risk of driving a car is much, much, much higher than participating in a clinical trial. It is actually a very safe thing to do.
Before any trial can go ahead, it needs to get approval from the MHRA, the Medicines and Healthcare Regulatory Agency. They look at all details of the drug being investigated. Approval also needs to be given by an ethics committee.
Keep going. Thank you. What the ethics committee wants to do is to minimise the risk, but also make sure that the risks are very well described, and also that the research participant will be fully aware of what will happen to them if they take part in the trial. Committee members are appointed through a rigorous selection process, but we're not looking for any particular qualifications. So we may have farmers or lawyers or solicitors or retired people from any walk of life in terms of wanting to contribute to the ethics committee service.
At Richmond Pharmacology, before they could start a trial on a drug to treat osteoporosis, they had to weigh up all the ethical issues involved.
This particular clinical trial is a cardiac safety trial. What we are looking at is some medicines can potentially cause an irregular heartbeat, and in the worst case this can actually lead to cardiac arrest where the heart stops beating altogether. That obviously is not an acceptable side effect in a medicine that is meant to treat osteoporosis, which of course is a severe disease, but at the end of the day not life-threatening. This particular trial is carried out in healthy volunteers, which is the best population to undertake this sort of testing, and because one would expect that they have quite a normal heart and healthy heart.
90% of applications to ethics committees are passed, but most require some changes.
Often these are from the perspective of the patient information sheet and how the research is described to the research participants.
The word sometimes quite hard to read, especially if you've never actually done that type of thing before, and obviously they have to try and put it in sort of like layman's terms. But I read through that obviously myself twice to sort of like make sure that I felt comfortable with the actual trial that I was going to come onto.
Volunteers were carefully screened before starting the trial. It was essential that they had a healthy heart and no medical problems.
You get a physical examination at that screening, and then they decide from there to agree that you're okay to come onto a trial.
Another key issue for the ethics committee is around payment to participants, particularly around healthy volunteers. Payments are made not for risk, but for expenses and for inconvenience, and an ethics committee will look very closely at the level of payments that are proposed for the study to ensure that they're not at such a level as they're likely to influence the decision made by the research participants in terms of taking part in the trial.
But is it about the money?
A little bit about the money, and I suppose I'm more of an optimist than a pessimist, and even after some of the bad publicity that's been in the press with drug trials, I'm someone that tends to think, well, I don't think that's going to happen to me. So, for me, I think probably the biggest reasons was meeting people.
With so many ethical issues to consider, should we really be carrying out drug trials at all?
Medicines are poisons, so if you are being prescribed something by your doctor, you want to be sure it is going to be safe.